All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys have had a great week. We're doing a mailbag today. Got about a dozen questions. We're going to be bouncing all around the league. A bunch of interesting stuff to get into. It's going to be a fun one. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget, it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on our podcast feed. We also have new social media feeds on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for the Hoops Tonight channel, where we're releasing reels and things along those lines. So make sure you follow those feeds as well. And the last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We're going to have mailbags on every Friday throughout the season. So keep dropping them and we'll be grabbing them from those comments. I go through the entire week's episode. So you can drop them in any of those and I'll just kind of go back through them and pick out questions for us to hit on Fridays. All right, let's talk some basketball. First question. You ready to apologize to Tatum yet? Like yourself, I'm a huge Ant fan, but that number 5 slot belongs to Jayson, and you know it. Tatum is averaging more points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game, steals per game, fewer turnovers, higher true shooting percentage, and significantly higher PER than Anthony Edwards, all while remaining the better all-around defender. Not to mention, he's the only player in the NBA currently averaging the most points, assists, rebounds, and steals on his team. A couple things. Apology is a really strong word to use for, I had one guy 5th and one guy 7th on a list where I told you guys from 5 to 11, I view almost no gap. I had 1 through 4 as kind of their own thing. And I said 5 through 11 are all this close to each other. So yeah, I think apology is a little dramatic. That said, there's no doubt that Tatum has played like the guy that's the best of that next tier of stars to start this year. I think Jokic is rock solid at number 1. Luka's off to a bad start this year, but you're not going to supplant him over a dozen games when he missed training camp with a calf injury. Luka's gonna play a lot better over the large sample. And then Giannis is playing some of the best basketball of his career, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is really starting to pick up steam here in recent weeks. So that tier to me is still more or less what it was. But if you're looking at the next tier of teams or next tier of players, the 2 guys that have really separated, I'll say 3 guys, the 3 guys that have, honestly, there are a lot of guys that are playing good basketball right now. Anthony Davis has really separated himself. Jayson Tatum has really separated himself. Kevin Durant has really separated himself. Steph Curry hasn't had the overall counting stats that he needs in that department, but he's had some of the most impressive individual performances this season, and he's outplayed multiple guys that are above him in the rankings. He outplayed Tatum head-to-head. He outplayed Shai Gilgeous-Alexander head-to-head. He outplayed Nikola Jokic head-to-head, right? So, those are the guys that are separating from that, lower group. But I would say night to night in overall production and, all of the little things that impact winning, the best player that I've seen from that next tier of teams to start this season is Jayson Tatum. And so there's no doubt that he has been the guy that has, at least through this small sample to start the year, taken that 5 spot. It's been a bunch of different things. The jump shot, which, I've been on this entire summer. I think a lot of people were just oh, he's too buff now, he's not going to shoot. And anybody who's played basketball for any significant amount of time knows, sometimes you just go in a shooting slump. Sometimes you, I think about even in my adult life, I had shooting slumps when I was in college where there were stretches where I shot the ball really well. And then I had stretches where I had a season in conference play where I shot damn near 50% from 3. And then the very next season at the start in non-conference play, I had a week where I missed 22 straight threes in a single week. So sometimes you just go into a slump. But even in my adult life, and I work on my jump shot a lot, probably more than I should as someone who doesn't get paid to play basketball. I have stretches where it's sometimes for 2-3 months, I'm just not quite shooting the ball as well. And then I have other stretches where 2-3 months, it's I can't fucking miss to save my life. There's different kind of just oscillations that take place for jump shooters. It's kind of part of the way it goes. And I thought Tatum was just in a slump last year. And I thought that he was going to come out of it in a big way to start the season. And he has. One of the big things I was talking about in yesterday's show was he's been doing a really nice job of hitting contested catch and shoot threes by just kind of hesitating and waiting for the closeout to come and for the guy to sit in a stance to try to slide his feet. And then right in that gap when the defender kind of closes out high and then sits, he's rising and firing and he's hitting a lot of shots in those situations. But I also think he's made a significant step forward as a passer this year. He's had 4 straight games with at least 6 assists. He's averaging a career high in assists. He's getting his assists in all these different ways that you see from some of the best playmakers in the league. And as you pointed out, he is the better all-around defender, not just in Anthony Edwards, but he's one of the best all-around defenders in the league. So here's the thing. Going into the season, yes, I ranked Anthony Edwards at 5 and Tatum at 7 in a tier of players that was 7 players big that I viewed all more or less on the same level. So, like, am I going to be like, I'm so sorry, Jayson Tatum? No, of course not. That's stupid. That's foolish. That's dramatic. But, yeah, Jayson Tatum's been the best of that tier of 7 guys, in my opinion, to start the season. One last thing on Anthony Edwards. A lot of my Anthony Edwards optimism stems on the fact that I just think he's an awesome jump shooter. And I think that that's real. And we're on a massive sample size now of him doing that. And by the way, Anthony Edwards is averaging 28 points per game on 60% true shooting to start the year. So he's not having a bad season either. There are just guys in that tier that have been playing better than him. And one thing I would give Ant a little bit of slack on is the roster is a little janky because the front office threw a massive curveball at them a week before training camp. And now they're like the Knicks trying to like figure out how to be a new team on the fly. So like, and we have a question about that later on in the mailbag, but for the Knicks and Wolves, I think it's foolish to jump to like sweeping declarations about them until we're much, 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 much further into the season. But again, shout out to Jayson Tatum. Again, there's a question about this. I'll actually fast forward and get to this one if I can see it. We'll get to it when we get there because I don't want to waste a bunch of time searching through this right now. But like, there's a lot of people that like take these like kind of pretty mild stances that I take and turn them into like Jason hates that guy. And that I just don't understand because like, that's just not the case. Like just because I have a slightly different opinion than a specific fan base on a player doesn't mean I dislike a player. I think that sometimes is once again kind of dramatic and unfair. Let's get to the next question. Sorry to see this as a fan since day one, but it hurts me to notice that you can't talk about the Nuggets' success without acknowledging Westbrook's impact in their wins. Bad to see that you look biased about this issue. Again, this is another battle that I can't win where it's like, yes, I have multiple times in multiple different episodes credited Russell Westbrook for the job he's done with the Nuggets. I talked about the job he did when Jamal Murray was out in some of the huge games that he had. I talked about little moments like the individual defense that he played on RJ Barrett on that huge possession at the end of the Raptors game. He had a similar possession on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander where he took away his pull-up jump shot and funneled him into a drive. Like, I have complimented Russ. And so I don't know what to say. This is another thing that happens to me pretty commonly where, like, people will watch some of the content that I produce, but not all of it, and then make sweeping declarations about all of my content, even though they didn't watch all of my content. Like, I talk about basketball for the better part of 5-6 hours a week. And so there's a lot of words, a lot of sentences in there, and there's a lot of opportunity for me to hit other teams and other players that you might not hear if you only catch an episode here or there, if that makes sense. Which, by the way, I don't blame you guys. There's a ton of really good basketball content out there. I know that there are some of you guys that listen to every episode, and I know there are some of you guys that are like, I only listen to my favorite team, and there are some of you guys that you only listen every once in a while, depending on what we release. I understand that that's the case, but like, I do a ton of content every week. So if you're one of the people that stops by every once in a while, you're probably missing some of the stuff that I hit in the big picture. Russell Westbrook has had really high ceiling moments for the Nuggets this year, and I've talked about it on many occasions. If the playoffs started today, this is Warriors fans, I had a mailbag question at the tail end of Tuesday's show, and talk about a fucking meltdown from some of these Warriors fans in the mentions. If the playoffs started today, taking Luka over Steph is a wild take. Steph not only outscored, but outplayed Shai and Luka, but can't give him the nod over them. Guys, like, Luka Doncic had a very impressive playoff run last year. He did something that I haven't seen anybody do last season, and that even Nikola Jokic struggled with, which was he like single-handedly eviscerated the Minnesota Timberwolves defense. It took one of the best perimeter defenders in the league and just basically treated him like a rag doll as he threw him around and got whatever he wanted and took his team to the NBA Finals. Luka has not been very good to start this year. He got injured in training camp, missed training camp, and he's trying to get his way back into shape in the middle of the season. Here's the thing. Yes, if we're 50 games into this thing and Steph's playing like an MVP, then yeah, I'm going to reevaluate things, and I'm probably going to put Steph in that top tier, and I might put him ahead of a Shai. I might put him ahead of a Luka. But it would be irresponsible of me over a small regular season sample at the start of the year to be like, yeah, this guy's better than a player who just went on a deep playoff run last year, or like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who once again, like, deservedly got a lot of MVP consideration last year and took his team to within one foul of making it to the conference finals and eliminating Luka Doncic. So, like, that's the thing. I am a huge believer in Steph. I think what he's shown at the start of the year in terms of his ability to get to that superstar upside should be super encouraging for Warriors fans. But yeah, like, there are players at the top of the league that have been really dominant consistently over the course of the last couple of years that right now feel like safer bets. And I would never change that over a small sample size. I had a lot of guys in the comments like, he just outplayed this guy. He just outplayed that guy. That's great. I have seen a ton of stars outplay other stars in regular season games. I've seen Joel Embiid outplay Jokic several times. I've seen guys outplay Luka. I've seen guys outplay Shai. I've seen guys outplay Giannis. I've seen guys outplay Steph, LeBron, AD, Tatum. I've seen guys outplay everybody, right? On any given one game in the regular season, it's important because it's a sign to Warriors fans and to the rest of the league like, hey, Steph still has it. Steph can still do this, right? But there's a much larger sample that we're going to see over the course of this season. And before I go proclaiming that Steph is better than Luka or better than Shai, I'm going to need to see more than a dozen games. And honestly, like even though Steph has had some really big games this year, his counting stats just aren't even in the same stratosphere as those guys at the top of the league. And so let's see more before we supplant guys that have been playing really, really well for a long time at the top of the league. Next question. Steph definitely looked like a top 10 player to end the season last year. What was you watching, bro? Last 25 games for Steph last year, 22.8 points per game, 4.5 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists per game, 42% from the field, and 38% from three. He wasn't good to end last year, not by Steph's standard. Now, yes, there were factors at play. He was worn down. The roster was weak. It was a lot less fast. A lot of Klay Thompson and Chris Paul instead of really fast young players. There are a lot of reasons for that. But to be clear, going into the player rankings that I did this summer, Steph didn't even deserve to be considered top 10. There were several players. Donovan Mitchell deserved to be ranked over him. Jalen Brunson deserved to be ranked over him. I kept him in the top 10 as a sign of respect. And because if you guys remember in that video, I said, I think this is a slump and I think Steph will bounce back. But like, there's a lot, this happens a lot with NBA fans where like, there's a lot of evidence that one thing's going to happen and then something different happens. And then everyone wants to be like, I fucking told you. And it's like, actually, like, this is a change. This is new information. This is new. So like, you're like people that made educated guesses based on stuff that was actually happening. Everyone else is making hopeful guesses on what they think maybe will happen. Like, and yeah, the thing that was hopeful and maybe ended up happening. And that's great. And you guys should be very, very excited about that. But like, again, like there's a reason why there was some skepticism surrounding the Warriors. And what ended up happening, right? What ended up happening was you swapped out Klay and Chris Paul and all of the minutes they play. And I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it was like 50 something minutes a game. You took 50 something minutes a game and turned it into super fast younger players. And then in addition to that, like you had a new training camp. You hit on a couple of signings this summer. Steph Curry is playing like a superstar again. And now all of a sudden you look like a contender. It's a combination of a ton of factors, a ton of new information. Did anybody think when Buddy Hield got signed that he was going to play as well as he did? No. A lot of you, like, it was a good fit, an obvious fit. I think everyone thought he'd hit shots. I don't think anybody thought he'd be as good as he's been. This has been a surprise. And so again, it's like, appreciate it for what it is. It's exciting. I'm excited too. Steph's my second favorite player in the league behind LeBron James. Like, I am excited. I root for this team. Like, this is something that I enjoy. I said the other day in a mailbag, the team that I enjoy watching the most is the Warriors. They play an incredibly fun brand of basketball. This is great. I'm thrilled. But I'm not going to like apologize for the things that I said over the summer that were based on evidence, that were based on the actual basketball that was being played. The Warriors have flipped the script. They've been a surprise. So have the Cleveland Cavaliers. How many of you Warriors fans were saying that the Cavs would start the season 13-0 and look like the best team in the league? Probably none of you, right? It's a surprise. But what you should do is acknowledge it, acknowledge the new information, be excited about it, try to learn about them. We did a whole hour breakdown with Carter Rodriguez from the Chase Down podcast on Wednesday, where we went into a bunch of the different things that the Cavs are doing different. And then we learn and we move on. The same thing on the negative side. Like, I had the Sixers as like my 6th championship contender. Now it looks like a lot of their veteran minimum guys are pretty limited, and they can't keep their 3 stars on the floor healthy. And so they look like a team that's a hell of a lot worse than I thought to start the year. There are things you're going to be right about. There's things you're going to be wrong about. There's things you're going to be spot on about. I had a feeling that the Clippers would be really feisty this year. They've been really feisty this year. I had a feeling that the Lakers would be a pretty solid and like more professional looking team than they looked last year. They have to start this year. Like, there are things that I'm right about. There's things that I'm wrong about. That's kind of part of the journey. But yeah, like Steph wasn't playing at a top 10 level to end the year last year. I had a feeling it was a slump. That's something that I was right about to start the season. The Emirates NBA Cup is here, and you can win big getting in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All 30 teams split into 6 groups every Tuesday and Friday, playing for the right to advance in the single elimination in-season tourney, culminating in the NBA Cup Championship in Vegas. Get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the best place to bet NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like picking how many points your favorite player will have. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. The current favorite to win the NBA Cup is Boston at plus 425, with the Cleveland Cavaliers in second place at plus 850. First time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's code HOOPS, HOOPS, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. Downplaying the 2022 championship is hilarious when you support the 2020 championship. This is the biggest thing that Warriors fans got pissed off at in the mailbag. All I was trying to say is this is not like 2022 because the teams are better now. So first of all, I am not downplaying the 2022 championship. I think it's the crowning achievement of Steph Curry's career. It's one of the most impressive championships that I've seen. I am not undercutting that at all. All I was trying to talk about is the concept of the Warriors needing more firepower. On a real basic level, you guys tell me if you disagree. In the comments, tell me. Jayson, you're wrong. Jayson, you're right. Tell me if you agree. Are the Celtics this year better than they were in 2022? Yes, they are. Are the Luka, Kyrie Mavs that just went to the finals going to be a more difficult opponent than the Luka, Jalen Brunson Mavs that you ran into in the Western Conference Finals in 2022? I think that yes, they are. They're deeper. They have a much better secondary shot creator. Luka's better now. They're better. They're just better. Like the Denver Nuggets that you beat in the first round. Are they going to be a little bit different this year with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. healthy? Yeah, they are. It's going to be different. It's going to be better. Oklahoma City is a much better team, in my opinion, than that Phoenix Suns team that ran away with the top of the Western Conference in 2022. Like, there's the teams at the top of the league are better. Do you disagree? Because if they are better, then the team that won in 2022 might not be enough anymore. And so that's why I was talking about, like, that's why I look at them as a team that could use some more top-end firepower. I don't want to see the Warriors go down in a second or third round series because Kyrie Irving is spelling Luka with 27, 28 points a game efficiently, or because Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are getting buckets off of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Buddy Hield goes cold and Andrew Wiggins goes cold. I don't want to see that. I want to see Steph flanked by a guy that you can reliably count on to produce 20, 25 points a game efficiently at the forward spot. That's all I was trying to say. Like, a lot of times, like, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, a lot of times, like, everything gets turned into some massive sort of big picture thing when I'm just trying to hammer a specific point home. I was trying to hammer home that you guys need more firepower, not that the 2022 championship, not trying to downplay the 2022 championship. That's silly. All I'm saying is, will you guys admit it? Will you admit that the league is better now? Because it is. It just flatly is. You're lying to yourself if you won't admit that the league is better now. So, like, I don't know what to tell you. The league is better. I would like to see this Warriors team with more firepower, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Next question. Hey, Jason, could you explain why AD's defensive RFG percentage is around the middle of the pack for centers? When I watch him, it feels like a presence, just like a Gobert, Chet, Wemby, etc., but the numbers just don't reflect it. AD's defensive RFG percentage is at 58%, where Chet's and Wemby's is around 40%. Love your work. A couple different things here. First of all, defensive metrics are incredibly flawed on a bunch of different levels, and that's pretty much widely accepted even by the stat nerds that like lean on that kind of stuff all the time. And so I always like take those sorts of things with a grain of salt. Secondly, it's about the team. Like Gobert is playing with substantially better perimeter defense talent. Chet Holmgren is playing with substantially better perimeter defense talent. Even Wemby, who doesn't have the type of talent that OKC and Minnesota has on the perimeter, is playing with better perimeter athletes than the Lakers. If a drive is flattened out before it gets to the rim, it's easier to defend. When you've got guys like Austin and Rui and D'Lo giving up like straight line drive after straight line drive with like real momentum towards the rim, it's just harder to stop. And so again, with Anthony Davis, a lot of people underrate Anthony Davis defensively because of the team metrics that come out of the Lakers, but it's just not realistic because they play with there's literally not a guy in the rotation who's like an elite defensive player other than Anthony Davis. There's just not one. It's like there's guys who are solid. It's like, oh, Gabe can kind of slide his feet and kind of do his thing. Austin Reeves is solid. He can do his thing. Like there are guys that have specific skills. Like Rui can do some help defense stuff. He can defensive rebound a little bit. Like, you know, Max can slide his feet. He's just a little thin. You know, Cam Reddish has got long arms and can move his feet. But like, there's just not a guy on the roster who's like even the same level as like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker as a like elite guard defender. The only guy in the Lakers who is Jared Vanderbilt, and he hasn't played basketball in damn near a year. So it's hard to even like imagine. Like Vanderbilt's practically just a theoretical thing for me at this point. So it is what it is. But I wouldn't pay too much attention to defensive metrics surrounding Anthony Davis. I don't think they properly reflect his impact. Thank you for giving Tatum his credit. This was the question I was looking for earlier. Thank you for giving Tatum his credit. In years past, I feel like you've disregarded a lot of what he does because of your own admission he's not one of your favorite players. But I appreciate not only your objectivity, but also how you went into depth about how his play style shifted this season. I think I've been the most impressed by him this season, understanding when it's him that really needs to take over. Every Celtics game this season, it feels like there are 1 to 2 stretches per game where Tatum alone will go down and score 8-12 consecutive points for the Celtics when he's out there with the bench unit. Usually it happens towards the end of the first quarter or the middle of the third quarter. This was kind of what I was getting at earlier, where it's like, I argue Tatum is 7 instead of 5, and everyone thinks I hate the guy. Like, yeah, you're right. He's not my favorite player, but I don't like dislike him that much either. Like there are basketball players that I watch where like I don't like watching them. Like Luka's like that. Joel Embiid is like that for me. Jalen Brunson's getting a little there for me with some of the grifty stuff. But even then, even when I don't like the guys, I have such a love and respect for the game of basketball that like I still watch Luka, and it's like even though he irritates me sometimes, I'm like, God, that's impressive. God, this is impressive. Like I still look at what they do and have appreciation for it. Same goes for Joel Embiid. Same, like the footwork and the skill is impressive. Like Joel Embiid is like legitimately like a good 3-point shooter now. It's like, it's crazy. You know how hard he's had to work to do that? Like I feel like if he's open and gets a good look, I feel like it's going in. Like there's a lot that I appreciate about those guys too. Now Tatum isn't like my favorite player, but I don't actively dislike him either. But I've always had an appreciation for everything he does well. And a lot of times it turns into this thing where it's like, okay, I have this guy at 5 instead of 7, and I have this guy at 7 instead of 5. And people interpret that as like, you hate this guy, or you're thinking he's the 17th best player or the 24th best player. That's silly. I've always viewed Tatum as like one of the guys that's in that second tier of stars, right below the top of the league. So most Celtics fans actually agree with me. That's the crazy part. Most Celtics fans agree with me. There's a segment of Celtics fans that think he's in the Giannis, Luka, Jokic tier. And look, here's the thing. With the way he's starting this season, like he's getting certainly closer to that tier. As I said in the beginning of the mailbag, I think he's at the top of that second tier at the start of this season. But like, yeah, I feel like I've always talked about Tatum being a versatile defender. I think I've always talked about Tatum being a guy who's made strides as a playmaker in recent years. I've just also pointed out things like, yeah, dude, you rely a lot on tough jump shot making. And this year he's making them. which is making him look like a better player. But in years past, he's relied on tough jump shot making and not made them. And it's been an issue for him. It's been an issue that's extended to even the Olympic team not wanting him in the rotation. Like I feel like the criticism that I levied was fair. And so that's kind of where that comes from. And I want people to understand, like when I talk about a player's like upsides and downsides, I'm just trying to do my job. And when I rank players in specific spots, it doesn't mean a lot of times if I'm arguing for a couple spots lower, I'll bring up some negatives, but that doesn't mean I think the guy is 15th or something along those lines. And honestly, like one of the things that I've seen a lot with Tatum fans too is they'll be like, why don't you ever criticize so-and-so for this? Why don't you ever criticize so-and-so for that? And like, I feel like if you watch this show, you can tell I do criticize even the top players in the league. I'd argue I criticize the top players in the league more. Ask Jokic fans. There's a lot of Jokic fans that get upset with me because last year I said he couldn't shoot and he had a shitty defensive season. Like that's the guy that I think is the best player in the league. And I was openly criticizing his shooting and his defense throughout the entire second half of the season and in the playoffs. Luka Doncic, I said that the defensive performance he had in the finals was the worst defensive performance I've ever seen in the finals. Giannis, I talk all the time about how in the half court, he can really struggle to be as decisive and efficient as his teammates as his peers at the top of the league. I've talked about how he hasn't as good of a defensive season as he did last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I've criticized him for not being as much of a willing passer or surgical half-court passer as he needs to be. Like, I am critical of all the players at the top of the league, not just Jayson Tatum. If you think I'm only being critical of Jayson Tatum, then you're only listening to my Celtics content and you're only reacting to the stuff I'm saying about Jayson Tatum. So again, I wanted to clarify that because I think it's become something that has slipped through the cracks a little bit. Could you explain what you define as athleticism? One of your main gripes with the Lakers has been a lack of athleticism in the backcourt. And of course, I can understand that players like D'Lo and Reeves aren't particularly muscular or bouncy, but I feel like I'm missing the point of why that matters so much to the success of the team. Not even being specific to the Lakers, what qualities do you point to when referring to athleticism or lack thereof in the big picture? Love the show, man. Thanks for keeping me entertained at work when I can't watch the games. Thank you for the kind words and for supporting the show. When it comes to athleticism, it's a combination of factors. So I think size, strength, there's like foot speed, right? Like foot speed and coordination. There's actual speed, like straight line speed when you get going full speed. Start-stop ability. There's conditioning is a major one that I think gets glossed over a lot. The like more physical tools, like how long are your arms? Where's your center of gravity? Is it higher where you can get bumped off your line? Is it lower where you're better at holding your ground? All of those factors get baked into athleticism. But like, I mean, it all kind of comes together in a big way. Like there are guys like that, like for instance, the Lakers front court players, LeBron and AD, get burned in transition all the time. Nikola Jokic is not as like fast or quick as AD or LeBron, but he plays more consistently hard. Like Jokic's conditioning is so top tier that the dude just sprints up and down the floor all the time. And so he doesn't get taken advantage of in transition as much as some of his more athletic peers at the center position. Steph is a guy that doesn't necessarily have the athletic tools of some of the guys at the top of the league, but his conditioning is better than everybody, and he just runs in circles the entire damn game, and he catches you slipping every single time you relax. That's a factor of athleticism, right? Draymond Green's long arms. He's an undersized big, sure, but he can meet guys up top at the rim like he did with Daniel Gafford, or close out to the three-point line like he did on, I think it was Najee Marshall in the game on Tuesday. He can get there and he can get great contests and sometimes even block shots because he's got super long arms. All of that stuff combines into athleticism. And there's just way too many guys on the Lakers where it's like Rui, or excuse me, let's say D'Lo. It's like D'Lo is like slow-footed, not particularly fast, not particularly big, not particularly strong, and not particularly well-conditioned. He's a bad athlete. Gets burned all over the floor all game long. Rui, big, strong, long. That's good, right? But slow-footed, loses sight of with his conditioning. And I also even think there's like a mental athleticism aspect, which is like how good are you at like staying attentive and focused on the details, because that's such an important thing. I think all of those are parts of the game of basketball. Curious to hear your reaction on Bronny only playing home games in the G League. I do not see how this could be good for Bronny. Totally agree. I think most of the complaining about the Bronny situation has been like straight up people who just don't like LeBron irrationally and like are taking it out on the Bronny situation. That's most of it. But this is something that I genuinely don't understand. Like, the kid needs reps. He needs to play basketball. And like, there's this thing where it's like, oh, they don't want him flying Delta because he's too famous. Okay, I understand that. I get that. Like, I get how LeBron James could be like, I don't want Bronny like sitting on a Delta plane with a bunch of like, American citizens, right? Where like just because it's a little uncomfortable and he's such a public figure and he's become slandered so much and all this kind of stuff, right? I get that, totally understand, but like, figure it out, man. Figure out the transportation piece. Because like it's not going to work for anybody if one, Bronny's not getting the reps he needs because he's only playing in half the games. Two, Bronny's with the actual big team when the G League's on the road, but he can't actually play because he's not in the rotation. And three, the G League team is trying to actually put together a cohesive roster, and they've got a guy in the starting lineup who's in and out of the lineup based on whether or not they're at home or on the road. Like, that's not working for anybody. And like, just because of transportation, like, dude, you're a billionaire, LeBron. Get Bronny to the games. I don't know what to tell you. Get Bronny to the games. Like, there's got to be a way to do it that doesn't involve this sort of like shuttling back and forth and only having playing home games. Like, again, like, LeBron James is the most polarizing basketball player of my lifetime. Half the world absolutely hates the guy. I will never understand it. I feel like in his older age, it's gotten a little better, but there's still a big chunk out there that just hates the guy for whatever reason. And the majority of the criticism of Bronny is completely ridiculous. There's nepotism all over the league. None of you guys gave a shit when it was anything that had nothing to do with LeBron. Now that LeBron's involved, you got your panties all in a bunch. I don't understand what it is. It is what it is. But this specific thing is something that I disagree with. I don't understand. I don't understand how this could be good for Bronny under any circumstances. Is it high time the Lakers look at Vanderbilt as a trade asset now, given that he's always out, and get a 3-and-D player by trading him in D'Lo? So I would be okay with trading Jared Vanderbilt as long as you got someone of equal athletic capability that is a starting caliber player. So, for instance, if you have the opportunity, let's say that the Lakers decide to go after Zach LaVine. If you gave up Vanderbilt in the Zach LaVine trade, that would make no sense to me, because now you're giving up one of the few good athletes you have on the roster while getting back an athletic player, but not an athletic player that's functionally athletic in the areas you need, like defense and rebounding, right? But let's say that you're going to get an actual real elite perimeter athlete into like, let's say, for instance, you called the Clippers up and you were like, let's take Derrick Jones Jr. and James Harden in a deal or something like that. If that ended up being the type of deal that the Lakers went after. If it took Jared Vanderbilt to get Derrick Jones Jr., hell yeah, include him in the deal. Derrick Jones Jr. is a better basketball player and does all the same stuff. That's who I would want, right? But like, it all just depends on what you're getting back. If you're not getting a supreme athlete back that can start games, I don't want to give up Jared Vanderbilt in a deal. I know you didn't cover this game, but Wemby was 6 for 9 from 3 last night against the Jazz. It was the most threes he's made in his career. When Wemby was told of this, Wemby was surprised. Wemby is currently averaging 7 3-pointers a game, which is about half his overall field goal attempts. Do you think this style of play from Wemby will be successful in the long run? Well, he followed this up with an 8-3 game last night against the Washington Wizards when he dropped 50, right? So here's the deal. I talked about this in the show that aired on Thursday, but like, one of the things that's been really fascinating to me is these like younger, pretty athletic stars, guys like Anthony Edwards, a supreme athlete. Victor Wembanyama is some of the best athletic gifts in the league. Jayson Tatum, one of the bigger, stronger forwards in the league. Jalen Green, De'Aaron Fox, a couple of like really fast athletic guards that are taking 10 plus jump shots a game. And I think it really just comes down to the math. Like Wemby takes 8 threes. Or makes 8 threes on 16 tries. That's 24 points on 16 shots. What is it like that? That's 1.5 points per attempt. Like, when you're hitting at that rate, the math is just so overwhelmingly in your favor. He'd have to hit 75% of his shots around the paint to be equally as efficient. So I think it's leaning into the large sample. Here's the thing. I'm 100% okay with it as long as they're continuing to hit shots at a percentage where the math makes sense. But there is one caveat. In late game situations, when you get into the small sample, getting that extra point per make doesn't matter if you can't make the damn shot. So like, all these guys, I want to see them have something close to the rim that they feel like they can make at least 50% of the time. If that's a turnaround fadeaway, if it's a left shoulder hook, whatever it is that you go to, you got to have something close to the rim that you can rely on in small sample size situations when you can't rely on the math to benefit you over the large sample. All right, 3 more questions. In your opinion, Jayson, should the Pacers continue to start Mathurin even when Nembhard comes back from his knee injury? Mathurin looks fantastic this season, and if they make a trade, I could see a Nembhard Nesmith for Jaden McDaniels for the perimeter defense they need. Thoughts? Absolutely. I think when Andrew Nembhard comes back, that Ben Mathurin should keep starting. First of all, he's shooting the lights, like shooting the laces off the basketball, both off the dribble and off the catch, but especially off the catch. They had already been closing with him sometimes before the Nembhard injury. They'd close like with him over Nesmith or something like that. But they've struggled so much with defense and rebounding that I do agree that they need something at the 3. So like the ideal kind of configuration to me would be, you have Tyrese Halliburton, you have Ben Mathurin, you have Pascal, you have Miles Turner, and then somebody who's basically just like a bigger, like longer, better version of Aaron Nesmith at the 3, I think would make this team a lot more interesting. Maybe they're the kind of team that should be looking at like a Dorian Finney-Smith out of Brooklyn as a potential target for them. Hello, Jayson. How many more games do we need for the Knicks to find their chemistry? Although some of their depth pieces off the bench are injured and haven't played a single game yet. And when they do you think the defense will click along with their offense? So I would say with both the Knicks and the Wolves, I would wait like both of them have been really clunky to start the year. The Wolves just dropped back-to-back games in Portland where they couldn't score and were turning the basketball over a ton. And like the Knicks, it's like impressive game, huge dud. Impressive game, huge dud. Like they're just up and down like crazy right now. These are 2 teams that completely changed their identity a week before training camp and undid a lot of the continuity that they built over the previous seasons. I wouldn't take any sort of hardline stance on the Knicks or the Wolves until we're at least halfway through the season. If we get to the trade deadline and they have these clear flaws, then it's a different kind of conversation to have, but I'm not going to worry about anything until we get to that point. Last question. They have a 7-4 record with only LeBron. This was in reference to a Lakers tweet that I sent out this morning. They have 7-4 record with only LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Austin Reeves giving them anything night to night. And those 3 do it all, getting almost nothing night to night from most of the roster. 0 front court depth. Make some changes, and quickly this team will be something. This was in relation to the Lakers getting off to a 7-4 start, but barely having a positive point differential. And obviously there's a couple big blowouts in there. They got rolled by the Grizzlies on a night when Anthony Davis didn't play, and then they had that catastrophe when they went to Cleveland and just got the shit beat out of them. But for the most part, they've been a team that I'm actually like weirdly down on, even though they're off to a decent start in the standings. And the main reason why is they've looked so inconsistent down the roster. But like all these teams are figuring out with the Lakers that if you pressure the ball and you run on them in transition, you can cause them all sorts of problems because of their lack of athletes. And so to me, like Austin, LeBron, and AD are a rock solid foundation. They continue to demonstrate that again to start this season. There is a ton of skill down the roster. D'Lo is skilled. Rui is skilled. Dalton Connect is skilled. They have skilled players. They have to find a way to balance that out with athleticism down the roster in order to capitalize on it. But I agree. If you're looking for a silver lining as a Lakers fan, other than the top 3 guys, there's been no consistent good play down the roster. If you start to get that, either through just guys playing better or through the trade market or through guys getting healthy like Jared Vanderbilt, that's where there's some potential upside with this Laker team because their top end is so good. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. We'll be back on Monday with some game reactions and some power rankings. I will see you guys then.